Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. We're in a rain delay of Game 2 of Tuesday's doubleheader, but we're here to talk a little bit about Game 1. We're going to have some fun with this episode. Obviously, it's the dog days of summer. It's kind of the dog days of the Cubs season right now, but nonetheless, we're here to bring you an entertaining episode. I am Ron Luce. I am joined tonight by the Juice Man himself. Sir, how you feeling? How you doing? How's
Good,
everything?
man. Moved to South Bend for all our listeners so we could get some prospect updates. Going to head to the South Bend Cubs game next week. Might end up hitting up 2 or 3, to be honest with you. But, yeah, man, why not? Got to see the young kids develop. That way I'm more versed once this whole thing turns again. Because
Absolutely.
I'm at the point, man, where I'm waiting. It's time to build the next great Cubs team. And if you're sitting there sulking, this is my first message to Cubs fans. I haven't been on here in a while. If you're sitting there sulking about the fact that they traded a bunch of people, I understand it. But the minute that you come out of that darkness, you start seeing what's going on in that farm system right now, man, you see some light, man. There's some light going on. And I know that we're gonna have some guests on soon to talk about the prospects and do a little mid-season run here. It'd be interesting to see, what these guys have to say about what's going on. Some specialists who are down on the farm, as we like to say. So yeah, man. My message is to, hey, it hurt. Trust me, I get it. I miss those guys, but you gotta just open your eyes. In the darkest of night, there's the little dandelion popping out of the concrete ground here, man. And if you're not looking for it, if you can't see it right now, trust me, it's there because I'm seeing it, man. I'm excited for this future Cubs teams. I'm really excited. I know it's hard to be right now because they don't win baseball games at the major league level, but trust me, man, it's coming. They're coming.
It is coming, and a guy that you'll be able to see down in South Bend right now. I saw the statistic earlier. Alexander Canario acquired in one of those deals. I believe he was acquired in the Chris Bryant deal, if I remember correctly. He's on an 8-game hitting streak right now with the South Bend Cubs at high A ball, right in your neck of the woods now where you're at. So, yeah, there is a lot of excitement, and a guy that is a part of that we actually are going to talk pretty in depth about today is Justin Steele. Made his first start today. All things considered, looked very good. I know people probably read the stat line and go, and I'm like, yeah, and I get the whole but I beg to differ because I really do think there was a lot of good in today's start. I was lucky enough. Again, I work at home, so me watching the Cubs games is nice and easy for me. But before we get started, Mr. Doe Bradbeard, how are you, sir? Evening to you as well. But Juice, I mean, let's talk about Justin Steele. I feel like that's kind of the elephant in the room of today's set of games. I honestly don't think – I think a lot of people lost interest in tonight's game because Steele was moved to the earlier slot instead of supposed to pitch tonight like he was originally scheduled to, had last night's game been fully played through. Cody, fellas, how are you, sir? He's currently vibing in section 228 at Wrigley.
Stay dry, brother.
That's what I told him. So, but Cody's here to vibe with us. Everybody else that's here to vibe with us, we appreciate you because we are going to vibe. We're going to talk about some good stuff today. And I honestly, very, very pleased with the fact that Justin Steele did what Justin Steele did because I think he looked incredible today. Sure, he got the loss. Sure, see, I don't understand this. It says that he gave up 2 home runs today. Was I watched? Oh, no, it was 2 home runs.
He did.
Okay, now I'm good now. I'm back here. I'm back because I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, Escobar doubled, and then Garcia went deep, but I forgot the Adames home run, and that's the one that messed me up. So, sure, he gave up 2 home runs, but realistically, those 3 hits were really his only mistakes of the game. I mean, otherwise, he was really good. Goes 5 innings in the earlier 7-inning game. He only walked 1 batter. Sure, he only struck out 1 guy, but no big deal. Only gave up 5 hits and just the 3 runs. I think Justin Steele was absolutely incredible today, Juice. And I was very excited about it. And here's why. And then I would love to hear what your thoughts were about Justin today. Also, again, friend of Cubs on Tap. He follows the account, and we appreciate him. We're big Justin Steele fans here. I'm ready to get a number 35 jersey when the time comes. But everybody was talking about strikeouts, right? I actually wrote an article last night. I'm a little upset. It didn't do as well as I thought it would do. If you haven't read it yet, you can go check that out at www.ontapsportsnet.com. Thought it was a good read. But one thing I talked about in that article to look for today was strikeouts, because as he progressed throughout his AAA starts, his strikeout count grew. And obviously that grew with more innings of work. You know, he was 3 innings in his first time out, 5 Ks. Good numbers. You know, then he would step it up to another 5 Ks in 3 2/3. He would hover around 4 and 5 Ks. And then his last start, his second start, going 5 innings, 8 Ks. So clearly a guy that can strike a lot of guys out and not walk a lot of guys. So my big thing was, do we see a lot of the Ks today? Do we see a lot of heat today? Do we see him touch 98 like he did at AAA? And does he only walked 1 batter all day? Things you love to see. Didn't strike out a lot of guys, though, and that's okay. And the heat, I think he was very consistently hovering around 94, 95. We saw him working a changeup, which we really hadn't seen much when he was coming out of the pen. We got to see a lot more of that curveball that he can throw because he was really throwing a lot of fastball slider as he was coming out of the pen. So, again, and the first 7 batters he retired, all on ground balls. Like, that's great. That's fantastic. Keep the ball out of the air, especially when it's hot and humid at Wrigley and you know the ball's going to fly. And obviously we saw that later when Garcia put one like through the freaking entrance tunnel into the bleachers. But yeah, man, I mean, he looked fantastic today. So I would love to know what you thought about Justin Steele's start, because I was pumped up despite the loss and all things considered. Very good debut for Mr. Justin Steele.
Yeah, I think it's hard to sit and judge first starts for guys like that. It's a different feel. You know, coming out of the bullpen at Wrigley Field and coming in and being told you're coming in is and think about it as a bullpen guy. You arrive to the ballpark and you don't know if you're going to get in the game. So you prepare like you're going to play, but it's totally different when you see your name in the paper and it says Justin Steele starting, you know, now it was game 1, obviously, like you said, moved up. But I think it's going to take a couple starts for him to get used to starting a ball game, way to sequence his pitches. I think what was a take from me was the first run through the order, I loved what he was doing. I loved the sequencing. I loved the fastball slider, like you said, working in that changeup. Now it's going to be preparing that plan, right? You know, you always talk about guys like Kyle Hendricks and Greg Maddux, who they kind of thought their way through a baseball game. And I think for him, that's going to take a little bit of time because he was used to coming in from the bullpen, throw that nasty slider, that curveball, and just pump it as hard as you can for an inning. And then you're done, right? There's no thought about, you know, you being seen for a second time or, you know, them sitting on pitches that it's a totally different ball game. And I think it's going to take a couple of starts for him and behind the plate, you know, Wilson Contreras and the staff to figure out, you know, hey, this is what he likes to go through, you know, as a starter. Cause I think it's different. I think it's a totally different ball game when you're talking from a bullpen guy to a starter. And I think if you wanted to look at the silver line today, he looked great, but the stuff, man, like you said, having the repertoire that he has, I think a lot of it from here is all mental. It's putting it together. And I think that if I'm going to, as a Cub fan now, and obviously they're not trying to win baseball games, you know, they're just trying to get looks at what they have in terms of Justin Steele. And you know, obviously we'll see Keegan Thompson probably get a couple starts as well. And that'll be interesting too. And we'll have the same conversations about both. And you could loop, you know, Adbert Alzolay in that same, because now it's about figuring out, you know, how you go about, you know, winning baseball games, how you sequence pitches. Like, you know, for Adbert, we've talked about his struggle with lefties. Like, now's the time to figure out what pitches you can use to get lefties out. With Justin, I think it's a lot of sequencing. It's a lot of, you know, figuring out what pitches to go to early, what to set. Maybe you want to pitch backwards. Maybe you want to, start him off with breaking stuff and get him out with fastballs. Maybe you want to use that sinker more often, with runners on base to get ground balls. That's what's so great about Justin Steele and why I'm so intrigued for his future, because he has so many pitches that can beat you. And there's so many different ways that he could turn into a quality start. Like you said, he didn't strike out a lot. But you know what? He has strikeout stuff. So it's a matter of, hey, I didn't have it today. And let's be honest, man, it was tough to pitch today at Wrigley. It's so damn hot out there. It feels like an oven. It's your first start. The ballpark isn't that packed because, let's face it, it's a 12 o'clock game that was rained out. It's a mess. It's not a normal day. And
right.
I feel like, with all things considered, the heat, it being his first start, a lot of the sequencing and not knowing, the big league club really didn't know how he would approach hitters as a starter. It's different, man, like I said. So I think, all things considered, I give him a B+ for the effort today. A would have been going deep into the ball game and getting a quality start out of it. But I mean, realistically, like you said, man, there was really only one inning that was a boo-boo for him. And after that, he looked really solid.
Yeah, and I think, speaking of that inning too, and this is what I gathered out of it watching that inning, is 3 quick hits, right? The Adames homer, the Escobar double, and then the Garcia homer. But then he really settled down and settled in. He didn't look very flustered at all. I mean, all things considered, like, I'll be completely honest, as if I was a rookie pitcher making my first start in the major leagues and that happened, I would be pissed. I would be cussing. I'd be swearing. I'd be, you know what I mean? Like, but he was like, all right, hey, it happened. It is what it is. He dialed in, got 3 quick outs, gets out of the inning. No problem. And that, like you said, I think, all things considered, when you look at the full body of work from his start earlier today, that is huge, I think, for him, is that he doesn't, and again, he did this his first time up when he was coming out of the bullpen too. Steele had no problem coming into a dirty inning and just shutting it down. And I think that's huge because, like you said, it's the mental aspect of the game, right? Like, that ability to not get incredibly flustered is so important for a major league, pitcher. I really think that might be the most important thing for a major league pitcher. Like, you look at, they all do it differently, but like, Scherzer gets really fired up and like, he's that dog and he's like, I'm going to come get you. And, or like a Lance Lynn on the South side who just, calls everybody slapdick motherfuckers and just keeps it moving. You know what I mean? But then like Kyle Hendricks, who's just very straight faced, but he keeps it moving. And to see Justin Steele do that today, I was super duper pumped about. A couple of the comments here, want to get into them. Have lower payroll than the Rays next year. That is interesting. Definitely something we will. No, there's no chance that happens. But it's up to you, sir, as well. Saw your second comment there. Absolutely love that. Cody saying that's a shame. Justin, thanks for joining us, buddy. We appreciate it, man. We're big fans here. Very much on the hype train. I'm literally like watching the calendar of when his next home start's going to be, and I really want to go. Like, that's where I'm at right now. And Dope Redbeard actually saying that he is going to be in Cincy next Wednesday, hoping to be able to catch some of those guys before the game on the field. That's in the comments. I wasn't going to pull it up. It's a couple different comments, but he did say, though, Juice, 5 innings in a 7-inning game, pretty solid though, right, Juice? I would say that is because
I was looking more at pitch count and things like that. I was kind of rating him on a 9-inning game. But with that said, no, I mean, he was great today. I've said all those things that I loved the first start. It's tough to go into Wrigley Field and pitch your first start. I know he's been there before, and it's not that mound isn't different for him. But with that said, all things considered, it being tough to pitch there today, and let's face it, man, that's a pretty decent Brewers lineup. I know Yelich wasn't in it, but there's a lot of pop, since they've made trades, and I man, I was very impressed today. I'm excited to see him pitch again.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, in fairness to those that look on paper and go, "Oh, well, Yelich wasn't in the lineup. What's that?" Willie Adames is like a top 20 player in baseball right now since he joined the Brewers. So like
So good.
that dude's a legit. Avi Garcia's always been a big power hitter. I mean, Eduardo Escobar was an all-star. I think a lot of people forget that just because he played out in Arizona for half the freaking season. But they have a very good lineup. And again, those were the only guys that got to steal today. Were their
Yep.
big guns. That's it. Everybody else looked like a bunch of,
Yeah, you can realistically look at three
double A
pitches.
guys.
You can look at three pitches today, and that's the line for Steele. You know, that's the difference
That's literally
between
the difference.
which it's baseball, right? You know, sometimes it comes down to that, and I think it's hard to grade too because obviously, like the Cubs are kind of working through, you know, some of the lineup side of it. You know, there's not much to write home, but there's a lot of new faces around there as well. It's a different kind of ball club to go and watch and have play behind you as well. So I think, you know, in terms of putting numbers up and obviously, you know, them kind of falling short in terms of, you know, the run total that they needed today to win the ball game. You know, I think it was tough to pitch underneath those conditions and, you know, to get the run support that he got. Obviously, I thought he had a great start. I thought he was fantastic today. So
yeah,
I'm intrigued. You know, that's what we're looking for from here on out from these games, right? We're looking for these little growth moments, and I think you can legitimately say, you know, he took a step forward.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of growth in today's game, a lot of good things to talk about. And again, I think what I was most excited about today, once the game started, is admittedly being here in Chicago. Unless you're dialing into every AAA game that's on marquee, and even then, there's no guarantee you were going to catch a Steele start. We really haven't gotten to see a lot of Justin Steele pitch unless we're watching, minor league baseball TV and things like that while he was down in Iowa.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how deep his arsenal is because, again, when he was coming out of the pen, we saw a lot of, fastball slider. Again, that slider, something that
nasty.
Right. And JD talked about it at depth that was something that he's developed since he's been in the Cubs system. He was a big fastball curveball guy coming out of high school. But then to also learn how much he uses the sinker to just change that angle on the fastball. Additionally, then to work in the changeup today as many times as he did was really pleasant. He has a 5-pitch mix. How many freaking pitchers have the Cubs had in recent years that have a 5-pitch mix? Yu Darvish, maybe that's about it.
Yeah,
I mean he's like an 18. He's got like an 18 pitch mix, but that's
we need to just start the I Love Cubs pitch lab. We just need to start that T-shirt. That needs to be a T-shirt, man. Pitch
really does.
love or something. I don't know. It's
because it really.
But these guys, they work hard. You know, that's the other part of it. You know, I mean, you can have all those resources, but you know, game planning and going into, you know, picking from veterans. I'm sure, you know, they've all talked to Kyle. They've all talked to Jake.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that, you know, they can use from here on out. You know, because in a lot of ways, I know they're trying to win because it's the competitor in you each day that you step on the ballpark, or, you know, into the ballpark.
Absolutely.
But, you know, a lot of what the front office and the organization is looking for the future is the growth part, right? You know, that's the silver lining for the rest of the year. And I'm very impressed with what I saw today. And I think that we're only going to see that get better. You know, we're only going to see him grow as, you know, he sees more hitters. He gets in more jams. Like you said, that's those mental reps and those reps on the field are going to be so valuable, you know, for the future, because like you said, there's a lot of young guys that are going to be coming up, you know, in the span of a year and a half here who we're going to get really excited about again. And I think that's, you know, we need to all start to work our way into that click mode of like, let's try to make sure that we're watching these with the glasses on of the future. You know, they're going to make mistakes. I mean, I remember watching Javi Baez at the plate, you know, in 2014, you know, and the strikeouts just high, but he ended up being, you know, a very valuable player because you started to see the small things in his game, you know, the base running, the fielding, you know, the power, you know, those are the things that add up wins. nobody's a Mike. Not everybody's a Mike Trout where they do everything perfect, right? And
Naturally.
that's the thing with what we need to tailor our expectations to what these guys do well. And there'll be attributes throughout this year that we look at, maybe we're not, maybe one of these guys is inadequate at one attribute, but they are so dang good at, driving the ball to the ballpark or putting the bat on the ball. That's Nick Madrigal, I think, is a perfect example. He's not going to bat the ball around and out of the ballpark like crazy, right? But he's doing something for your lineup that you didn't have. And that's getting on base. And that's, moving the ball, contact, finding holes. And I think that's, when you put this whole thing together, I think one of the errors that they had for a long time was that they didn't have a lot of that. And they didn't have a lot of guys where they focused on certain attributes to bring to the lineup and bring to the team. They just kind of got by on power and power arms. And you know what I'm saying? I think at the end of the day, they kind of got complacent with the idea this is how you win baseball games instead of furthering that idea. And I'm really intrigued for the future. I think what you're seeing in South Bend and what you're seeing, with the Tennessee Smokies and the Iowa Cubs, I think that there's a lot of good talent that just needs to be harnessed. And like we said early on, Justin Steele is going to be a mainstay of how quickly can they contend, right? It's the idea behind how good is he and how good can you check off, one point of the starting pitching rotation that you don't need to go get. And I think it's huge to see him succeed today because we realistically go into the future, we're going to have to fill it with guys from our farm system for the near future because I don't see, and I don't know if you've looked at the free agent market for starting pitchers, I don't see anybody out there that really makes you jump out like, hey, we need to be in on this guy. It's a lot of older, towards the end of their career, more expensive arms that I just don't know if the Cubs are going to be in on right away. They may end up being more or less like the here or there 1-year contract, flip them type deal again, looking into next year as they build, some equity towards the future. Or maybe you take a 1-year hit on a guy who wasn't valued as high and Pitch Lab and the staff can fix him, or make him a better version of himself. And I think that's, looking towards the future, I'm excited because I think that there is some pieces here that you can work with, and Justin Steele showed it today.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie in little trinkets to that incredible montage that you went on there, Juice, because that was a lot of great points, really. And I agree with everything that you had to say. Dope Redbeard in the comments in response to what you said about today's game for Justin Steele said very fair with the pitch count. Oh, he only threw 70 pitches through 5 innings. That's incredibly efficient. I mean, again, if this is a guy, as he gets more used to pitching more innings and that pitch count being higher, if you're comfortable him going 90 pitches, he probably gets at least into the 7th today.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, normal, I take that back on that. I thought it was much higher than that looking back at it, but yeah, no, that's
he actually
threw that first couple runs through, keeping the strikeout number down you're right on that. But that just shows how good that sinker is, right? He's able to throw that and get ground ball outs quickly. So
yeah, and I mean, and again, it's huge when you got a good fastball that he showed today. I think the first pitch of the game, he painted it like 94 high and inside for a strike. And then he comes back and he brings that sinker and it's just a little slower and it drops off. And all of a sudden that makes a huge difference when you have that kind of, that ability to do that. And I agree with the hot and humidity, and Dope Redbeard commented on that as well. Like the fact that literally he was pitching under a heat advisory today in Chicago.
Yeah, it's tough.
With long sleeves on. So huge credit to Justin Steele. I figure, I imagine that's a comfort thing because I think he's pitched all year with sleeves on. So to me, that screams just habitual because I was the same way. I wore, even in the hottest games when I played college football, I wore a 3/4 sleeve underneath my jersey. It was just a thing I did. So like, I totally get that. And I mean, yeah, he was absolutely incredible today. I was super stoked with what he did. I'm super stoked to follow him the rest of the season. I mean, this is a guy that the Cubs have liked for a long time, and they talked about it today on the broadcast. He was a 5th-round pick, and he got $1 million out of high school. Like, for those in contextual terms, I believe a 5th-round pick at the time he was getting picked, their slot value's like $300K. So he got signed for 70% above slot value. in addition to being a high school player, I mean, that's how highly the Cubs valued him in 2014 when they drafted him. And now you're starting to see that pay dividends. If he can execute, and I agree with you, I love Pitch Lab too. And the reason I love Pitch Lab is because the Cubs are finding these guys that clearly have talent. And you see this throughout the major leagues, guys with so much talent, but for some reason they can't put it together. This Pitch Lab is really allowing these guys to harness that talent and put it together. And that's why the Cubs are able to have so many successful bullpen arms that come out of the woodwork. A Rowan Wick, a Ryan Tepera revitalizing his career. Not a shot at Andrew Chafin, but he got significantly better when he got to the Cubs. Like, you know, and even Kimbrel, he was able to regain his stuff and reharness his stuff. And I'm sure he worked in that pitch lab. Like, for all of these guys to be able to do what they're doing with the pitch lab, I agree with you, man. I love pitch lab too, and we're gonna make that a t-shirt here in the on tap store here very soon. But Juice, this is a good question actually that came in, and I'm actually very intrigued to hear what you have to say because I have some thoughts on this as well. It comes from our boy R. I believe it's Caldy. I'm assuming short for Caldwell. 1908. I need to look at your Twitter profile, sir, because I need to know your real name. Like I know Dope Redbeard's real name's Aaron, if I remember correctly. Can you see Cubs buying prospects? And what he means by that is think what the Dodgers kind of did, where they'll take on these old contracts, but hey, we want Joe Blow and Joe Blow out of your farm system. And he uses the prospect examples of Hosmer and Kiermaier. And I think that is super intriguing because reportedly, the Kevin Kiermaier deal was kicked around by the Cubs at the deadline. If Chris Bryant or Craig Kimbrel were to be sent to the Rays, from everything I've read, the reason that didn't go through was they wanted both, and the Cubs obviously wanted a good return for that, and the Rays probably were like, well, you know, we'll kind of dip into this and that, and obviously the Glasnow reports came out, which. I mean, Glasnow would have been great. Don't get me wrong, but he's about to go Tommy John. He's going under the knife, and then he's got 1 year of control before he, you know, is not under team control anymore. So clearly that's what helped that fall through. But the Kiermaier idea was kicked around with the Rays sending prospects to the Cubs as well. And I think just the Rays didn't want to tap into that top, you know, farm that they have for two guys that were a rental and then a year and a half player and a guy like Kimbrel with the option. But I could totally see the Cubs going to the Rays in the offseason or the Padres in the offseason, two teams with very good farm systems, and saying, hey, I see you got Eric Hosmer and Kevin Kiermaier on decent-sized contracts, and you want to get rid of them. What are you willing to package in? And we'll just take on all the money, and we'll let him play out his day as a Chicago Cub, which, for fairness, I love Kevin Kiermaier, so would not be mad at all seeing him roam center field for a little while. Big Kevin Kiermaier guy. But it is an intriguing point. So, Juice, I want to hear your thoughts on this idea. And is this something the Cubs could entertain, especially this winter when they have a lot of money coming off the books? And I think everybody's realistically saying they can probably still at least sniff the NL Central top half. But realistically, 2022 might be another transition year. So, Juice, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I was totally in on this when I was seeing these reports at the trade deadline too, like you were talking about. I think the interesting part of it is, you know, those guys that play those positions, you really don't have like a mainstay at either of them. So
Sure.
you can legitimately pencil them in to eat up innings, you know, and if that's what next year is, Jed and company be stupid not to consider that. With that said, I do hope in some ways that 2022 is not another huge transition year and that they're building more towards. It depends what you get back to. If they go to the Padres and they say, you know, let's look at Mackenzie Gore, you know, that gets my ears perked up. You know, that's something that I'm interested in. You know, I mean, what's the kid? CJ Adams, the shortstop?
Abrams? I think Abrams.
Is it Abrams? That's another one. That's another kid but I'm more or less hoping that they can do that plus contend, right? You know, with how much is coming off the payroll, and if these guys can work, maybe your next year ends up being like a step under 2015. You know, 2015 was so fun, right? and that was these young guys were coming up and you're starting to learn who they were in a lot of ways, but I think the expectation to being that good next year is probably one that I wouldn't bet on. But with that said, there's ways to do this on the run and do things like that, right?
Mhm.
There's ways to pencil those guys in to be, not everyday players, but guys who are mentoring, guys that are getting time in the outfield. Obviously nobody knows what you're going to be doing with Ian Happ for the future. And, like Cody and I know a lot of these guys, on our show have said it wouldn't surprise them if they decline arbitration and just let him walk.
Yeah.
As this keeps going and he's hitting, in the middle of this lineup and he's not producing, it wouldn't surprise me now. This is where that's trending, right? He's not trending towards being a mainstay in the lineup anymore. He's trending towards maybe relocation. Now, with that said, I think giving up on a young player like that too is going to be really tough, considering that they do know that he has that potential, and maybe they just think that they can, give him a year off and over the offseason fix some things that they're seeing with his swing. But I'm all the way in on doing that, because if it brings you back a AAA level prospect like we looked at, at this trade deadline, he's just added to the core of the group that's going to be coming up probably maybe the back half of next year. I mean, a lot of these guys are looking towards, your Brendan Davis wouldn't surprise me if he keeps raking like this. He ends up with the ball club next year in the beginning, starts that clock. That's something that, I think is something we can agree is possible. A lot of the other guys that they've bought on, with losing that year, they've made their way through the ranks fairly quickly. I think adding a high level prospect like that is something that I would totally look into. It's all about the deal and all about the fit, right? And what you're looking at over in San Diego is, they're gonna have to cut cap. So they're not in a place of negotiation either. If they have to get it done, and there's really not that many teams that can take on a contract like Hosmer, I think that puts the Cubs in a negotiation, dominant spot where, you can demand high prospects at that point, because it's not a matter of them getting underneath the cap and it being, it's a matter of them winning now. So they don't want to take away from the MLB club. And if they think they're good enough to contend right now without, a guy like Mackenzie Gore or, like you said, CJ Abrams, for the future, maybe that's the move. Maybe they don't see him as a fit. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, what that deal would look like and what they'd be willing to give up, because I think that's the $1 million question, right? It's
absolutely
who do they see from the San Diego side that is a staple for their future? If you would have asked that same thing about, for Javi Baez, like in 2014, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys that, would have been like, no. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's hard too. I mean, remember in 2015, going into 2016, there were a lot of Javi Baez trade rumors too, but the Cubs saw Javi as a big contributor to what they wanted to get done. So I think it's hard to like look at Mackenzie Gore and look at Abrams at the top of that prospect list, which is what you would start with the conversation with,
right?
In terms of, and then work your way from something that's acceptable, maybe something that Jed, kind of values more than maybe they do. Maybe that's the move, but I think it's hard to right now sit there and be like, all right, I know for the future I can demand this guy because he's not a part of their group when they make a run. Because it's, and even the movement with Fernando Tatis, them talking about him playing more outfield. I think it's interesting to kind of piece that together too. Maybe that means that Abrams is closer to the majors than they think too, because he is a shortstop. So maybe that's the way they supplement that. But I don't know, man. I'd be really interested to see what the package would look like. But the Cubs are gonna turn over every stone.
Oh, absolutely. And you honestly nailed it on the head, Juice, because again, in a young team where you're building for the future, guys like Eric Hosmer and Kevin Kiermaier are still could be very important players. And we've gotten some good comments when you were going ahead and sharing your thoughts there that I would like to personally address. One in which I feel like I can answer well. For those that don't know, I have family in Tampa. The Rays are kind of my second team I've always followed. So I quite honestly know quite a bit about the Rays that I probably shouldn't. But our buddy Dope Red Beer here, KK, essentially the same type of player as Jay Hay, is he not? Yes, very elite defensively. He's a center fielder, though, by trade. Obviously, Jay Hay, much better in right than he is in center, can play center, but statistically, all the underlying numbers scream like Jay Hay is an elite defensive right fielder, and that's where he should be. Kiermaier's problem has actually really been injuries. The bat hasn't always been great. It's been okay. He was a platinum glove winner, I believe, actually in 2015. Or actually, no, excuse me. I believe he was a platinum glove winner in 2016 when Anthony Rizzo won it for the NL. I believe he was the AL platinum glove winner that year. Very good defensive player. I would almost say just as good, almost maybe even a little better than Jay Hay in the field. I mean, Jay Hay's really good. Don't get me wrong, but like Kiermaier is very good. Kiermaier's problem's just been he hasn't been healthy. And in fairness to Kiermaier, every long-term outfielder we've ever seen down in Tampa in that godforsaken awful stadium they play in St. Petersburg has had the exact same problem. They can't stay healthy. Why? Because they play on shitty turf. Carl Crawford experienced the same problem. Rocco Baldelli, the current Twins manager, experienced the same problem. And Kevin Kiermaier is going through the same problem now. The reason nobody else has experienced it is because nobody's played there long enough for that problem to happen to their knees. Kiermaier, Crawford, and all those guys did. And I think that's a huge problem with it. And that's why I think they need to get the hell out of St. Petersburg. And I've been yelling from that rooftop since I was about 10 years old. But we won't beat down that drum too far. Joey Ricotta, what's up, sir? I see you there in the comments, man. Appreciate you jumping in. But Juice. First off, I do want to say, if he has stuck around this whole time, Justin, thank you for listening, sir. Again, we are truly big fans. I keep seeing people talking about it and like, it's awesome. I mean, again, we are trying to connect to the Cubs. We are trying to, be a part of the Cubs fandom. And obviously the players that eat up this Cubs fandom are awesome to us, guys that we appreciate. So, definitely appreciate that. Our boy Arcaldi mentioned Hassel, outfielder prospect from the Padres, as you were mentioning the Padres. And maybe Gore, if he's having a rough year, maybe that's something that could actually benefit him. But Juice. We've talked a lot about the future and probably getting to the time where we need to wrap things up here in a little bit. But there's one thing we need to discuss from today's game. It was the 3-for-4, has a 331 average on the season with a 909 OPS. That would be Rafael Ortega. And I am so in on the Rafael Ortega train. And for those that maybe have seen some tweets over the weekend and were like, wait, really? Because I'm not the only one. I am not the only one because our boy Joey Ricotta, he says, pour all of the Rafael Ortega hot sauce all over me. Dope Redbeard followed that up saying he is on the hype train, if he's being honest. Well, gentlemen, ladies, and everybody else that is listening to this thing, would you like to know something? I, too, am on the Ortega hype train, and let me show you why. Look at this beauty that I picked up at Wrigley Field on Friday. For those listening as a podcast, I have a Rafael Ortega jersey in my hands right now. It's stitched. It's gorgeous. I got it in the bleachers on Friday. I may or may not have cracked them, just like we do here at On Tap Sportsnet with our fellow Sox panelist and contributor, Mr. Dominic Flisk. We got after it. And I told him, I said, if I go down there and the first jersey the lady pulls off the shelf is an extra large, I'm going to buy it. And what happened? I bought it. So I will be wearing this to a Cubs game, hopefully multiple before the season's over. And if they start selling Justin Steele jerseys, I know what I'll be paying money for too at some point here. But I am very excited about Rafael Ortega. But dude, I mean, again, like everybody was like, oh, it's a flash in the pan. He had that 3 home run game against the Nats, but like, sure, the power maybe hasn't been there. Maybe he's not hitting the home runs, but like the dude has still hit for average every single game. I mean, for fuck's sake, he was 3-for-4 today in a 7-inning game. And he really feels like a guy that, sure, he's later in his career. He's 30 years old. I know everybody thinks that's old, but it ain't that old. but like he's just getting the job done, man. And it's so refreshing. And I joked with you before we jumped to the show. I was like, he's what the Cubs needed. He hits for high average. They've needed this all season. He's thriving in the leadoff spot. Like, this guy might have, maybe not necessarily as a starter, but he could legitimately have a future in the Cubs, at least maybe for next year, as maybe like a fourth outfielder. I think that's something that could totally happen because he can play all three spots, and he plays a good center field, which, again, something the Cubs have always struggled to have. So, Juice, thoughts on the Ortega hot sauce, Mr. Rafael Ortega?
Contact, right? That's the theme for it's what seems like the future. I think the cool thing is you're going to have to find guys that fit like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to, even if he isn't an everyday player, you're going to have to find guys that you can move around and I like to use the example of, for forever, these baseball teams have had a guy who has been on the squad for like forever, right? You're talking about, going back, I'm trying to remember like 2015, like going back to like it was kind of like Rizzo, right? I mean, Rizzo was kind of like the beginning, but I mean, like it was like you had guys who went through the whole thing before you were good again, right? The kind of bridge guys that you're kind of talking about. And I think Rafi's having a good run here. Like you said, he's hitting. I think he's hitting 400 for the last 40 games, like I said.
Yeah,
it might be something like that.
It might be 22, but nonetheless, hitting 400 over anything longer than like a 10-game stretch
is awesome. So in like 85 at bats or something like that. So it's not a small sample size either. You're looking at a decent sample for a guy who, but we're going to have to find stories like this, right? You're going to have to find players that fit for the future. And I know he's 30, but I mean, it's a guy that you can have and you can check it off like, hey, I got, a guy who kind of fits the mold of what I'm going for. The way I want to position this baseball team for the future is more contact, putting the ball in play. And he does that. And I think that that's something that has been fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And, the power, sure. Yeah. I mean, but they're going to be able to find power guys. They're going to be able to pencil those guys in for the future too, right? We're going to find mainstays of this lineup, your Brendan Davises who hit for power and slug the hell out of the ball. But we saw how that works when you fill the lineup with guys like that. Depending on, the last 4 years, it's been that case study, right? It comes and goes. It's really good or it's really bad. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when the pitching got better, it was really bad because it was easy to game plan and it was easy to go about the same type of hitter over and over. So more diversity in the lineup is what he brings. And I think that for the future, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's going to have to be guys that can play meaningful time while we get to that point where like that next core gets developed. And there's a good chance that some of those guys stick around. I think 2015 was a really good example of that because we had guys like Jonathan Herrera on the roster, guys like Chris Godwin on the roster, like that type of player where they were really relevant when this team was still building toward that competitive nature, but still found a role to be important to that next competitive team. And I really think right now, like you said, a guy like Rafael Ortega brings something new, something refreshing, something different to this Cubs lineup that it has struggled to have over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years. That is really kind of a breath of fresh air, and I think does a lot of good benefit to having him in the lineup. Couple cool comments here. Yes, Kevin Kiermaier is a Fort Wayne guy, so he is pseudo-local.
Really?
So that would be kind of cool to see him at Wrigley, even if it was just for 1 or 2 years, however long the rest of his contract is. Joey, our boy here, says it's November 13th. He wants a Rafael Ortega jersey. Hey, we'll see what we can do, man. We'll see what we can do. You never know. We might be able to do something cool and get some Rafael Ortega jerseys out. But Juice, obviously, the huge highlights to me of today's game was certainly our friend here at Cubs on Tap, Mr. Justin Steele. Looked incredible. I can't wait for his next start. I'm already just all fired up for it. It's going to be this weekend, which is great for me. I'm going to be able to sit in front of my TV and not move as long as he's on the mound. But what do you say, man? I mean, we'll talk a little bit. So currently tonight's game, literally there's really not much going on. It seems like
just ask Justin if they're gonna.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're about to start back up.
Great.
So
Nice.
the live just changed here. Mills out of the game. Obviously, he's been sitting way too freaking long to come back into this one. Rex Brothers looks like he'll be coming out on the mound to take the ball for the Cubs. So it looks like we'll have a game. This game, obviously, because we went live now, will be briefly mentioned on tomorrow's show. But Juice, quickly, just for tomorrow, for those that don't know, usual suspects for listening and watching in both Chicago and Milwaukee. This game is a 7:05 game for tomorrow. If they get tonight's game in fully, great. Then they don't have to play 2 tomorrow. It's a full 9 innings. Otherwise, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Yeah, I agree. Joey nailed it on the head. Hate that Mills had to basically skip a start because he actually looked really good for the first 2 and some change innings of tonight's game before the tarp came out. But just so everybody knows, I don't even know if it's worth previewing Juice in too much depth, but Arrieta is slated to go for tomorrow night's game. Yeah, I think that's the general consensus with most Cubs fans nowadays. And it's a TBD for the Brewers. It's kind of been their TBD for the whole series so far. They've been mixing it up because of the rain and things like that. So that'll be the discussion of tomorrow night. We'll talk a little bit about the rest of tonight's game that, again, is about to start back up here. I've noticed our viewer count go down as it feels like that's going to start back up. So in correlation, all good, all dandy. But we'll be back to talk about tomorrow night's game after the Jake Arrieta start against TBD from the Milwaukee Brewers. It would be cool to be talking about the ability to go up 2-1 in the series if they're able to come back and win tonight. We'll see, and we will talk all about that here at Cubs on Tap tomorrow. So, Juice, do you have any quick final thoughts before we go ahead and shut this thing down?
No, go Cubs. Let's see this young group of players progress. I think that's the word of the year for the second half of the year here. So progression, baby. Let's see it.
Absolutely. And I think we saw a lot of that progression today with Justin Steele on the mound. Looked great as a starter. This dude just strikes me like he's born to be a starter. Was good, obviously, coming out of the pen his first time up with the Cubs, but actually down in Iowa for his first few appearances before they started to have him start games, he actually kind of struggled out of the pen, but then he dialed it the fuck in as soon as he got into that starting role. So really feels like this guy truly meant to be a starter. Obviously, he's had some injury history in the Cubs system, but a guy they really liked, and they really made sure that he signed with them when they drafted him in 2014. And if today's any indication of what the bare minimum is, 5 innings and 3-run ball, shit. I think they, like you said, that the Cubs have found a guy that they can plug into this rotation for years to come that they don't have to go out and buy because don't know if you saw the stats. It's kind of my final thought. Cubs have, including today's start from Justin Steele, since pretty much their competitive window, more or less. It's like the last 4 years or something like that. They've only had 8 starts from guys that they actually drafted. That is by far the lowest in the major leagues. I think the second lowest is the Boston Red Sox. And I think they had 108. So, like, it's a sizable gap.
Yeah,
but I'm excited. I'm excited for Justin Steele and hopefully Keenan Thompson here in a few weeks to start to kind of poke into that number a little bit and bring the Cubs up to, somewhere at least with the rest of the league, even if it is still toward the bottom, just because the last few years have just been so, free agent and trade heavy in what the front office was able to do. But Juice, holy shit, I am just I'm all over the place. It has been a day. It has absolutely been a day. But before we get out of here, man, I want to remind everybody Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. You can go and check out all of our great work over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. You can check out our pod-related accounts at Cubbies, that's Cubbies on Tap. That is both Twitter and Instagram. I am at Luce on Tap on Twitter. Juice is at Juice on Tap on Twitter. Go follow all of our other great contributors as well, at Cody on Tap, at Joe Maris, at Marty Laval, at The Riot 326, which is our boy Joey Ricotta, who's in our chat tonight, and all the other great people here that contribute to Cubs for On Tap Sports Network. We got great Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks coverage as well. Bulls playing right now, I believe, in Summer League action. I think P. Will went off for 30 points, if I saw that correctly tonight. He's having a game. The Bears, obviously Justin Fields is enough of a storyline alone to get excited about them. And the Blackhawks really revamped their roster. They look like they could actually be competitive and fun this year too. make sure RIP to Tony Esposito, by the way, who passed away today after a battle with pancreatic cancer. So make sure to be sticking with us for all those teams that we cover. And yes, Cubs fans, we all have at least one. If you're like me and Juice, we have a lot of them, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but unfortunately.
As of this week, unfortunately.
Yeah, at least for like a few days. But nonetheless, we do cover the White Sox as well, and our boys over at Sox on Tap do an incredible job covering the Southsiders. So once again, www.ontapsportsnet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on social media, the OnTap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, this was fun. It seems like we timed this perfectly. Thank you for everybody that joined us during the rain delay. Hopefully the Cubbies get a big win tonight. We'll discuss this game a little bit on tomorrow's show, and we will also discuss the originally scheduled game for Wednesday. From myself, Ron Luce, from Juice here at the Luce and Juice Show. It's always a pleasure getting to talk on the mic with you, buddy. And what do you say? We wrap this thing up the only way we know how?
Let's go Cubs.
Let's go Cubbies.